in this session, we want to talk about healthy communication. And I go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits again, when he said that seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I wonder just how much better most of our conversations, whether they're school conversations or otherwise, how much better they would go if we just stopped to listen and really listen before we felt the need to talk or to be understood ourselves. And so I want to challenge us. I know that these school meetings are about our children and they become really personal. And that makes it harder to listen when we get emotional. But I wonder how things would change if we first started as parents to understand really what the practical challenges of teaching our kids are. And we know that we have some, right? We don't have all the time in the world. We don't have all the resources in the world. There are many things that limit our ability to do what we would do if we didn't have those limitations. But I think sometimes as parents, we get so focused on the needs of our kids and our family that we fail to even consider that there are things out there that teachers and paras and therapists and administrators are struggling with while they try to serve us and our kids as well. So I would like to just challenge us to change the dynamic of that it's not always all about me. I'm going to chase a rabbit and tell a Haley story. I'm a counselor at a church in my other day job, and it was one day after church, and I'm talking to a guy, and we're having a pretty serious conversation. And Haley, who volunteers in the nursery, comes bouncing out, and she finds me and Karen and I, you can do whatever you want to with that, and says, "I'm hungry." And Karen says, "Haley, when Dad's through with this conversation, we'll go to lunch." And Haley says, "But I'm hungry." And Karen says, "Haley, when Dad's through with this conversation, we'll go to lunch. It's not all about you." Haley says, "I know it's not all about me, because if it was, we'd be going to lunch right now." Well, we need to remember sometimes that it's not all about us. But when we get anxious and when we get worried and we're thinking about these school meetings that are pretty formal because they have to follow a certain pattern, that it's really easy to go back to that survival mode and get focused on just us. So I want us to think about what are some key elements, because I think all of this IEP, ARD, school, parent stuff is about relationship. And so what are those important things? I think the first one is that everyone is working together to ensure the best possible outcome. And that's the dream. And if you remember to my previous talk, we're the carriers of that dream as parents. We're the vision casters. And so I want my job to be to win everybody in that room to that dream, that vision. And how am I going to do that if I don't listen to them and to hear the challenges that they may face in bringing that dream to reality in this particular setting? The second thing that I think we need to remember in any healthy relationship is that each person brings something of value. Okay? You bring a different lens to this conversation than I do. And because of that, you will see it slightly differently or maybe really differently. And either way, it allows us to bring a few more pieces of the puzzle together. The third is trust. And when I talk about trust in this setting, it's the idea that I know that you love and are committed to my student, to my child. And when I know that, and that you know that I'm committed to this school, that I want this school to do well, that I want you as a teacher to be successful. Why? Because that trickles down onto Haley. So if you love what you do and you love where you do it, it just makes things better. And so I want you to know that that's important to me. The next is open communication. Can we even talk about the hard things? Can we talk about those spaces where we disagree? And is it okay that we disagree? I would like to think the answer to that is yes. Because if we only spend time, and I think this is a cultural challenge that we are facing more and more in 2021, that it seems as if you and I don't agree, we just can't talk at all. And so you go find people who agree with you, and I'll go find people who agree with me. The problem with that is we need to come together if Haley's going to get the best possible outcome. And so we have to be okay with open communication, knowing that we all share the dream, we all share the vision, and we may disagree on the details of how to get there, but we're all going truly in the same direction. We want to create an atmosphere that acknowledges and honors diversity. And there are just different groups of thought here, and it's okay. And then the last element of a healthy relationship, I think, is just a mutual commitment that we're all in this to varying degrees going in the same direction. When we have those things, I think most of the things that really create trouble and problems and long-lasting issues in school-parent relationships go away. Why is it hard to have hard conversation? And so the question is this: what happens to you when a conversation gets hard? Well, the truth is that the wrong part of our brain takes over. You know this, right? The hair on the back of your neck starts to stand up. Your heartbeat picks up. What is that? Well, in layman's terms, we call that the fight or flight response. And when the fight or flight response kicks in, where does the blood go? Y'all didn't come here for a bio or whatever this language is, a medical lesson, but where's the blood go? Fight or flight tells us we have to prepare for a confrontation. So the blood goes away from the brain to the big muscles of the body, the arms and legs, because we're either going to have to fight or we're going to have to run. So, and if it's going to the arms and the legs, where's it going away from? The brain. And that's what we need in these settings. And that's what makes it really hard to control our emotions. So you say, well, Brad, that's great to say, just don't go into fight or flight. Well, how do I do that? Well, I stop early and tell myself, is this a place that I need to fight or run? Or is this a place where I need to stay and think? And the truth is, even if we are in a very confrontational setting, the best way out of this is to stay and think. The writers call it pause and plan. And when I pause and plan, it tells my body that I'm safe, so it allows the blood to start going back to the brain where I can start to think big picture. And that's where we need to get back to. So if we can get back to pause and plan, it becomes easier to control our emotions. But this is an emotional thing, right? We're all reminded that we're here because things didn't go the way we wanted them to at some point. Right? Well, that's a hard thing. And you as school people have to tell us that, right? I just remember sitting in ARD meetings and hearing, we're gathered here today because Haley Thompson qualifies for special services because da 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 da, right? That just tells us that we're in a space that we never wanted to be. And here we are. And the worst part of fight or flight is when we get there, we start acting in self-defeating ways. What does that mean? We get into survival mode and we start to think that instead of seeking first to understand, we start to say, you're going to understand me. I don't care what it takes. I don't really even care what you have to say because I'm going to say this. Well, at that point, we lose the feeling of team, right? And we start to move to you versus them, me versus you. And that's just not going to be the way we get our best possible life. So just in thinking, is it hard for you to listen to someone else's thoughts or opinion when they differ from yours? And then the question is why? Why is it so hard to hear somebody whose opinion is different? Are This will be a little strong, but are we so arrogant as to think that we've got it all figured out and our way is the only way? Or are we afraid if somebody brings a different vision that it might cause us to have to change some things that we really like? Or is it that we're really afraid to hear someone say out loud a challenge or a struggle or a barrier that Haley really faces that's real? And we know it in the back of our mind. We just don't want anybody to say it. We don't want anybody to bring it out to where we might actually have to deal with it. Well, we're going to deal with it one way or another, right? We're either going to be proactive about dealing with it or we're going to be reactive in dealing with it down the line. I want to challenge and encourage us to be proactive. Be okay, going back to the other session, being okay with who they are and how they were wired and that they have a grand purpose so that then we can talk about their strengths and their challenges so that we can build the best possible program for them. Why do we react the way we do when we disagree? Well, the reason is because of the stories we tell ourselves. And I'd love for you to think about this on both sides of the table, if you want to say it that way. When school disagrees with us as parents, what are the stories we tell ourselves? I hear these stories all the time. Well, they just don't care. They're just in it for summer vacation. They're not interested in new ideas. On and on and on, right? Where did we get those stories? Are they even true? And school has similar stories. Well, those parents don't want to do that because they're lazy. Or why are they just bringing this up now? Because they could have talked about this all school year. Why is it such a big deal now? Right? Interesting how when we disagree, we start telling stories about the other person that kind of demonizes or vilifies or puts them in a negative light. And the reason we do that is if I can vilify you, then I can discount your perspective. You don't really care, so your opinion doesn't count. Right? Well, what if we told ourselves the truth? And the truth is this. Most teachers are teaching because they love kids and they want to make a difference in their lives. Are there a few that are in it for the summer vacation? Probably. Okay. Are there a few that kind of like the schedule and the control over a classroom? Probably. But it's just a few. And by the same token, are there some bad parents out there? The answer is yes. Sometimes we're lazy. Sometimes we don't really want to do the hard work. But they're very few. So what if we gave the people in this meeting at this table the benefit of the doubt and said, you love my kid. You want what's best for him or her. And parents, we know you love him or her, and you're going to do everything you can to give them the best life possible. What if we just gave people the benefit of the doubt so that when we enter these hard conversations, what if we kept in mind these things? What do I really want for myself and for my child? Well, if I can keep that dream, that vision of what I really want for her in the front of my mind, it tells me what's important and what's not. There are some things that we could probably argue about in any setting that at the end of the day won't make a difference in where we're trying to go. We can let them go if we can keep this question in mind. What if I even thought to ask the question, what do I want for my school? How many of us going into an ARD meeting ever consider what would be best for the school? I just happen to think that if my school is successful, it will trickle down to Haley being successful. So why wouldn't I keep that in mind? And then the last question is, how would I act if I really wanted what I say I want? Would it keep me a little more calm? would it lead me to asking more questions than making statements? How would it change the way I engage in a meeting? So what we want to do is discover mutual purpose. Do you and the people working with your child have a shared purpose? And what is it? Well, if you've listened at all over these 2 sessions, you know that that purpose for me is the dream or the vision. And if everybody buys into that and agrees with it, then we know we're moving in the same direction, right? It makes it really important. What I tell people all the time, and even people who are having a hard time with their school, is that I bet if you flip through your IEP document, you will find that even in really tough settings, you have 3 or 4 things that you may disagree on. And you may disagree in a big way. But do you know that if you disagree with 3 or 4 things, that you have about 95% agreement on your IEP? I'm just telling you, I don't have 95% agreement in my marriage, but we keep going, right? But we get so focused on those 2 or 3 things that we lose perspective. What if we just acknowledge that and acknowledge that we have so much agreement that we can stay in it on the 2 or 3 or 4 things and figure them out, come to some agreement as time goes on? Wouldn't that change the way we see this meeting? I would like to think that it does. So recognize how much agreement that we have. And then what's the end result of that? I think the end result of healthy communication is the best IEP possible. And I think that IEP with good communication becomes a living, breathing document because we're continuing to talk about it throughout the year. And we're making those little adjustments here and there that don't require this big meeting, this big formal process, that just allows things to happen organically, which is the best possible way for them to happen. The other thing that we get from healthy communication is a team that is committed to seeing it happen. And when everybody's committed to seeing the vision happen, then we get the best possible